So today we're going to go to the moon. Like the Apollo mission, we are going to have a command module, a descent stage, and an ascent stage. But unlike the Apollo mission, we are going to have our descent stage and ascent stage on top of the command module. So we got all of our astronauts loaded up, and let's go out to the launch pad and let's get going. All right, and we are on our way. So I'm going to do almost a prograde launch all the way up to around 20,000 meters elevation, and then I'm going to roll over. So as we begin rolling over, I'm going to pitch down below prograde of my orbit so that way I can try to circularize my orbit as much as possible. As we get to the apoapse, we're going to circularize our orbit with our second stage that has way too much fuel in it, as you'll see later on in the mission. Now that we have a somewhat circularized orbit, I'm going to set up a maneuver node so that way we can set a course towards the moon. Now, if you'll notice is that I do not want to go on the back side of the moon. I want to approach the moon from its front. So that way when I enter its gravity well is that the moon will pull me back. So if you see here is that my orbit is going to the left, and then now as I enter the moon's or Duna's sphere of influence is that I am traveling the opposite direction. So which that helps bleed off some speed. So when I set my maneuver node to circularize my orbit around Duna is I don't have to use so much delta V, even though I have way more than what I actually need for this mission. So we're going to circularize our orbit around Duna, bringing in our periaps down close to the surface of the moon so we can bleed off some energy so that way our descent stage doesn't need to have to use so much fuel. Now, the regular Apollo mission, what they had to do was take the command module and decouple it from the spacecraft, rotate it around, and then dock with the lunar lander. I'm cheated a little bit, and I just put everything on top of the command module. So what you'll see is that once I clean the orbit up, is that I'm going to have the Kerbal conduct an EVA out of the command module, go up, get in the descent module, decouple from the top of the command module, and then do a retrograde burn down to the Duna surface. That just made everything in construction of the craft much easier than trying to hide it in a fairing. So once we get the Kerbal into the spacecraft, what we're going to do is we're going to decouple from the command module. We're going to face retrograde, but then we're going to hold our SAS at the horizon. What we're trying to do is we're trying to bleed off as much horizontal velocity as possible because Duna does not have an atmosphere. So we want to hold off on our vertical thrusting until we get close to the surface, and so that way we can be most efficient as possible. So once we've bled off some of that energy is that I'm going to again reorbit to the horizon, conduct another burn to kind of slow me down, and you can kind of see your retrograde marker on the nav ball as it's moving up because you see moving more and more vertically. So I'm going to conduct another burn at 45 degrees and then now just straight vertical. I conducted a little bit of a forward burn so that way I didn't land on the edge of the crater and so that way I wouldn't tip over as soon as I landed. Again, this craft has a lot of thrust for the weight of it. So as you'll see is as I get down lower is that I am almost coming to a hover with the craft. I'm making sure that once I get close enough, I'm going to set my SAS to not retrograde, but to just stabilize. So that way is that if I start going upwards, is that it's not going to rotate my craft 180 degrees, and then the Kraken will destroy your craft. So now we've landed on Duna. I'm going to get out, conduct an EVA, plant the flag. We're going to call this Site 51, which is the site of 51. Here it is. Okay. All right, now we can get back in the craft. I was too lazy to put a ladder in, so I just used the rocket thrusters on the Kerbal. So I forgot to turn on my SAS, so we went a little crazier for a little bit. But as you see is that I'm going to run out of fuel very quickly, and so I'm just going to detach that stage. Now it's RCS alone, because if I'm going to take RCS anyways to control the craft as a possible backup, I might as well use it as a source of thrust. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to circularize my orbit as much as possible at a low altitude as possible, because we docked our command module in a very low orbit. Looking back, this was probably way too low. As you can see, is that I'm just bringing up my Apple apps a little bit to try to bring it close to where the command module's at, and then now circularizing that orbit, so that way what I can do is once I get in a nice clean circular orbit, I'm going to switch to the command module, and then I'm going to raise its orbital plane. Reason why I'm doing that, and I'm going to go about over 3 times the distance from Duna, so that way it's easier to set up a maneuver node that intersects cleanly with the command module. What you see here is that I'm going around and around in orbits to see when I can set up a maneuver node that will intersect close to the command module. So looks here, I finally found one that runs close. So once I do, I get it as close as possible to conducting an intersection, and then I'll set up a maneuver node at that intersection that circularizes my orbit near or close to the command module. So that way our relative velocities are pretty low. So that way when I get close is that from there, all I have to do is make some fine minor adjustments using my RCS thrusters in the Ascent module to get close to the command module, and then conduct an EVA from the Ascent module into the command module. So as I bring the orbit close, I'm going to slightly tap on the RCS thrusters, monitoring my intersection point and bring it as close as possible. And then once that happens, what I'm going to do is I'll get a visual lock on where my target's at, and then as you see, I'm burning outwards, burning prograde, just to try to bring the target in. As you see, the target starts drifting towards Duna. I'll burn inward, burn retrograde, and just keep doing this over and over again, and I'll get close to a relative velocity just from visual, looking at the numbers of how far away my target is, and then just shoot towards my target. With RCS, the nice thing is that I don't have to rotate 180 degrees to burn retrograde. I just do reverse RCS. So that's kind of a positive of docking with RCS versus a regular rocket engine. So we made it close. So now we're going to get our little Kerbal from our Ascent module into our command module that has plenty of fuel. If you look at it, it's like 1967 meters per second delta V. So now when we set up our maneuver node, what you're going to want to do is just have your exit almost parallel to Duna's orbit. So what that'll do is that when you exit her sphere of influence, you're going to shoot straight back to Earth. So you want to bring that as close to the atmosphere as possible. And what I did here, since I had so much fuel, is that normally you would do an aero brake, so you would enter the atmosphere and use the atmosphere to slow you down. But I had so much fuel is that I came in just above the atmosphere, conducted a burn with my engines, and then brought my Apple apps in so that way I could conduct a more targeted landing. I was trying to land just off the coast of the Kerbal Space Center. And so as we get close, I'm going to conduct a retrograde burn to try to bring in what my predicted landing path is to just to the right of the what I would call the Channel Islands off the coast of Kerbal Space Center. So we've burned up all of our fuel. I've ditched the stage, and now I still have my heat shield at the bottom, and so that'll help protect us from reentry. Though normally when you conduct this maneuver, you're not doing that second retrograde burn. You're doing a exit burn out of the moon's sphere of influence and straight into the atmosphere. So you're traveling around 3,000 meters per second. And so when you hit the atmosphere, is that you have a lot of energy behind you. So that thermal shield helps protect the craft. Once we get down to about 500 meters elevation, our parachutes are going to deploy, and Our Kerbals inside are very happy because now they're traveling at around 4.5 meters a second, which is a decent velocity to hit the ocean. You can hit it a little bit higher than when you're on land. This would even be a safe velocity to hit land. So that concludes today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. Hit subscribe. If you like this content, give it a thumbs up. And let me know what your thoughts are down below.